So I want to push back on a common idea that's kind of out there in the music landscape, and that is that when you're learning music, you should start with drumming because it's easy or it's basic. And I disagree, and I'll tell you why. In my experience, rhythm, playing rhythms, executing rhythms, and I'm talking about experience teaching children all the way through adults, college, high school, recreational, professional. That is the most difficult part of music to master. Rhythm, not only does it define genre more than any other aspect of music, so it's really important with regard to style, genre, feel. I talk about macro timing and micro timing. Micro timing is more about the feel. Macro timing is just more about the general genre. But executing that makes or breaks the music. So rhythm is critical. It's also, I think, something that just takes a long time to get. It takes a lot of hours of practice. It takes diligent practice with a metronome or playing with people, that are better than you. So you'll get your rhythmic acuity, your rhythmic skills will be built up. What would be a better starting point in music learning and music playing than rhythm? Because rhythm is actually quite difficult. I am asserting that starting with something like timbre, which is the sound quality, just changing the type of sound that you're making is a great place to start with exploring music. Also dynamics, just getting loud and soft, experimenting with dynamics, intensity, louder and softer. Also very accessible, very doable by most people. They can have a lot of success in that area. Making different types of sound. So this relates to timbre, but with a little bit more refinement, we can get into pitch differentiation and start to identify pitch high and low, and then specific pitches, like starting on a tone like a drone, and then relating to that drone by doing something like sirening, just moving up and down and starting to find the relationships between, for example, the sounds I'm making and a fixed pitch. That is really accessible. It's fun, it's interesting, and very few places you can get that wrong. From there, we could look at texture and arranging. So we could look at texture in terms of what's happening in the moment, so layering different sounds together out of rhythm, And then we can also look at form. So doing something else, doing something like we did at the first section, so an ABA form, for example. Again, exploring lots of aspects of music before we're asked to play a steady beat, and certainly before we get into playing specific rhythms, which again, I'm going to say is one of the hardest aspects of music. And I'm saying this as a music student myself, as a performer, and as an educator. What I see, and I teach a lot of music workshops all over to all sorts of different people, many of them with college music degrees, and playing precise rhythms is just simply one of the most challenging things that people do. So I disagree that putting children or beginners on drums and percussion makes sense from a music learning perspective. The one thing, and I know many people will be thinking this already, is, Kalani, but percussion instruments are so accessible, they're so easy to pick up and play, as opposed to a violin or a trumpet or something. And that is absolutely true. So it is easy, and percussion instruments are resilient, they're largely inexpensive in a lot of ways. There's a huge variety. So there's definitely an argument to be made there for introductory, basic musical experiences using drums and percussion. Certainly easy for people to play along with a song, for example. If somebody's playing guitar, piano, or ukulele and singing, it's really easy for people to shake maracas along to it, for example. And that's wonderful. But the wall comes really fast, or the ceiling comes really fast. And so beyond the most basic music making, just kind of keeping a steady beat. But even a group of 10 people, if you just give percussion instruments out to 10 people and you say, okay, you guys all play together, I guarantee you it's not going to be really together. It'll be somewhat together, unless they're professionals, But that kind of proves my point. I mean, it's just not that easy for people to play a steady beat together. It takes time to practice rhythms, to be able to play together. And then on top of that, there's a difference between playing a steady beat or even a simple rhythm and then having it feel like it should feel for a certain style, right? Like Brazilian music or Afro-Cuban music, or there's a lot that goes into the subtleties of it. So again, yeah, you can approximate it, but to get to what we would consider to be the standard for that style of music, to represent that music in a way that people would expect, years of practice. So I also think our tolerance, and part of this is due to the fact that a lot of people, and I'm just speaking for the people, let's say Americans or people in the U.S. in my experience, and I'm generalizing here, so of course there's going to be exceptions to what I'm going to say, but I think because people are largely unfamiliar with the music of, say, West Africa or the Caribbean or South America or Asia, other kinds of what we call world music, that their tolerance for accepting an approximation that's fairly low on the skill level is much higher than it would be for music that they are familiar with, like, let's say, choir music that would be sung in a church, for example, or orchestral music that they've been hearing for many, many years, or even American-style folk music where they've been hearing the music and they know what it sounds like, they know what to expect. And I think when you give people instruments that are outside of their main culture, and then you say, oh, just play some music, they're going to be much more accepting of kind of a really vague approximation of that because they have no reference point. And there's no reason they would have a reference point. There's no reason they would be familiar with what it's, quote, supposed to sound like or would traditionally sound like. So I think that also contributes to the idea that percussion instruments and drumming is somehow easy or basic. Of course, something's going to seem basic when you're not familiar with it. It's easy to dismiss things that we don't know about. So I teach a lot of courses in drumming, and I teach music teachers and music therapists and other professionals, and everybody is usually really surprised at how much complexity and subtlety and how advanced the drumming music is when you really dig into it. But again, you have to get beyond that just cursory experience of it to appreciate it. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about. I hope this doesn't come across as too much of a rant or judgmental. I'm just saying this is my observation. And so if you want to give your students or your children or your community musical experiences that they can kind of dig into and be successful in, I would say you could do some drumming, but do other things as well. Do some singing, do some body percussion, do some soundscape exploration, like creating music to go with a story or something, or play music behind poetry that's not in a rhythmic framework, and you take away all of those hurdles that people have to jump over to get into playing music with drums and percussion. So again, timbre or sound quality, dynamics, moving up and down, focusing on tonality, but in a general way, like a drone with just relative, pitches, or maybe really basic musical scales like a pentatonic scale. Focusing on form, focusing on layering or arranging music in the moment. You can create a lot of interesting music that way, also in a community, all without having to meet rhythmic standards, which for most people are actually quite high, beyond the most very basic music making. All right, I hope that makes sense, and I hope it's helpful. When you want to give your students or groups something to do, you won't need to exert as much control, or they might not feel as frustrated, or the music might actually sound better if you de-emphasize the rhythmic component for a little while until people build up skills. Yeah, that's what I wanted to say. You might disagree. If you disagree, that's awesome. Leave your points below if you do disagree. I would love to have specifics on how you think or why. If you agree, that's okay too. But it's an interesting conversation to have, and I appreciate you hanging out here and listening to me lay the argument out, or lay my opinion out in this forum. So again, leave your kind and helpful comments below. Ask any questions you have. I'll do my best to respond to them. I'm Kalani. This is World Drum Club. Thanks for watching.